The stars stretched across the endless black sky like cold fire, and in the middle of that silent universe, there was a place every map showed, but no one dared to cross. It was a dark scar between galaxies, a region so empty that it felt alive. Ships that went inside never returned. God. Signals sent inside came back broken, filled with screams, whispers, or static that sounded like voices calling from nowhere. No other species even thought of going near it. They called it the Forbidden Zone. For centuries it was left untouched, like a cursed graveyard floating in space. The oldest alien empires told stories of that place to frighten their young. Bravest warriors lowered their eyes whenever the subject was spoken. The zone had become more than just coordinates on a star chart. It was fear itself. In the Great Galactic Assembly, leaders of countless species had debated what the zone really was. Some said it was the remnant of an ancient war. Others believed it was a prison, holding something too dangerous to set free. There were even whispers that it was a warning left by beings far older than any race alive. Yet across the centuries, despite all the theories, no one entered it and came back alive to tell the truth. Every race learned the same rule: stay away. That was the law the universe followed without question. But humans were not like other species. They had a habit of walking where others would not, of opening doors that were better left closed. And now, one human captain was preparing to walk into the Forbidden Zone. Alone, his ship floated at the border of the zone, small compared to the endless stretch of darkness before him. The scanners showed nothing. No stars shone inside, no signals. Escaped, no life could be detected. Yet as the captain looked out at the black void, he felt something staring back at him. He knew the stories, he had heard the warnings, but there was something inside him that refused to turn away. The captain was a man who carried silence like armor. He did not speak much, but when he decided something, nothing could move him. His crew had begged him not to attempt this mission. The council had not ordered it. This was his own choice. And it was madness. At the edge of the zone, other alien ships waited at a safe distance. They did not dare to go near, but they came to watch. To them, the human captain's attempt was not bravery, but foolishness. They whispered on their channels, mocking him, calling him reckless, calling him doomed. To them, he was another name, soon to be lost in the endless list of those who had vanished. But secretly, deep inside, they also watched with fear. Because there was always the chance, just a chance, that the human might do what none of them had done. If he entered and returned, the truth of the Forbidden Zone would be known for the first time in thousands of years. The captain stood in his ship's control chamber, staring into the black. His reflection glimmered faintly on the glass, but beyond it was nothing, only emptiness. His hands hovered over the controls, but he did not move yet. For a moment, it was as if the zone was waiting for him, daring him to step forward. He closed his eyes and thought of the voices that had haunted him since his last mission. A distress signal had led him here months ago, a broken cry from deep inside the zone. Everyone told him it was impossible, that no real message could escape from that place. But he had heard it, and he had promised himself that he would not turn away. He had lost people before. He would not leave anyone behind again. His ship gave a low hum as the engines came alive. Warning lights flashed across the dashboard. Automated. Systems screamed for him to change course to avoid the zone. Navigation maps shut down. The machine itself seemed afraid, refusing to guide him forward. He overrode every system, his voice calm but sharp, commanding the ship like it was part of his body. Slowly, the nose of the vessel turned toward the invisible border. The blackness before him did not move, but the deeper he looked, the more he felt it watching him, as though 1,000 unseen eyes studied his every breath. The aliens in their distant ships fell silent, their laughter gone, their channels frozen. They watched history happening. He whispered one word to himself. It was not a prayer, it was not a farewell. It was a promise, quiet and strong. Then he pushed the ship forward. The moment the vessel crossed the border, stars behind him dimmed, and the instruments died in his hands. The hum of the engine fell to silence. For a heartbeat, it felt like the universe itself had stopped. Darkness swallowed everything. Captain stood tall, not moving, not speaking, only breathing. The alien ships outside tried to track him, but their scanners found nothing. To them, it was as if he had vanished completely. But inside the silence, the human captain was still there, still standing, alone in a place no other had ever survived. The zone had taken him, but unlike all the others, this time it felt different. The darkness had not swallowed him by force. It had allowed him in. The darkness inside the zone was like nothing the captain had ever seen. It was not the normal black of space filled with hidden stars. This was deeper, thicker, almost alive, as if the air itself was pressing against his ship. The silence was heavy, so heavy that even the faint hum of his ship's systems sounded wrong. The controls flickered, warning lights danced, but the captain's hands stayed steady. His face was calm, his eyes fixed forward. Fear touched the edges of his mind, but he pushed it away. He had made his decision long before crossing the border, far beyond. Alien ships remained outside the zone, scanning, whispering, sending their reports back to their empires. To them, he was gone already. Their records would write his name under the list of fools who tried and vanished. But what none of them understood was that the human captain had not stepped into the void without reason. His choice was not born from madness alone. It was born from something deeper. Long before this moment, months earlier, he had sat alone in his quarters on a different mission, staring at a strange signal that refused to fade. It was faint, broken, but clear enough that his mind could not forget it. The message carried pain, desperation, and something else that sounded almost like warning. No one else believed it. No other captain in the fleet even wanted to discuss it. He said it was an echo, a false sound carried across space. But the human captain had listened differently. He heard a voice begging not to be left alone. Heard it like a promise meant for him. He carried that weight in silence. There had been nights when he stood at the viewing deck of his ship, looking at the stars with that message replaying in his head. He remembered the day his crew tried to convince him to ignore it. They told him the zone was death. They told him that no human, no alien, no machine could survive it. But he did not shout back, simply nodded, as if he understood. And yet, in his heart the decision was already carved in stone. For him there was no turning away. Why, no one truly knew. Some whispered that he had lost family in the zone. Others said he was searching for power. The truth was more complicated. He was a man who could not walk away from voices calling for help. He had once been saved by the courage of another, long ago, and he carried that memory like a scar that never healed. To him, it was simple. Someone cried out. Even from a place no one dared to enter, he would answer, even if it meant his death. Now, as his ship moved deeper into the zone, the silence broke with strange whispers echoing across his comms. They were not from his systems. They were not from outside. They came from the zone itself, soft, cold, impossible to understand, yet strangely close to human speech. He leaned closer, adjusting nothing, simply listening. His eyes narrowed, but he did not stop. The whispers grew louder, turning into half-formed words that vanished when he tried to focus on them. The ship's lights flickered, shadows stretched across the floor, and for the first time, the captain felt the air around him grow heavier, as if something unseen was breathing with him. Outside the zone, alien leaders argued in panic. Some demanded to pull back, afraid that the human might awaken something dangerous. Others mocked, saying he was already gone, lost in madness, swallowed by the dark. But none could look away. They had spent centuries keeping distance from this place, and now a single human had done what none of them dared. He had walked into the dark willingly. The captain's voice finally broke the silence inside his ship. He spoke not to his crew, not to his people, but to himself. His tone was steady, his words simple, like a soldier reminding himself of orders. If someone is still inside, I will find them. If not, I will find the truth. His reflection in the glass was pale, hard, determined. For him, this was no longer about survival. It was about answers. It was about keeping his promise. The ship trembled as it passed deeper. His navigation screen collapsed into static. The computer screamed warnings that the engines were failing, though he could still feel the low hum beneath his feet. He ignored every alert. His hand rested firm on the manual controls. In that silence, he remembered the moment before he left the safe borders. The last words spoken by his second-in-command still echoed in his head. "Captain, if you cross that line, you cross it alone, we will not follow." He had not argued. He had not begged. He had only nodded once, turned his back, and left. He had always known it would be this way. The void outside his ship began to shift. It was still dark, but now he could see faint shapes forming in the black, like ruins half buried in shadow. Towering structures loomed in the distance, too massive to belong to any modern species. They looked ancient, silent, and waiting. Eyes locked on them, his heart steady. The whispers on the comms changed, becoming sharper, almost human in rhythm. It was as if the zone itself recognized him, testing him, calling him deeper. He leaned forward, every muscle tight but unshaken. His decision had been made long ago, and now nothing in the universe could stop him. He was human, he was stubborn, and he was not afraid to walk alone where no other life dared to go. The darkness shifted again. At the edge of his vision, a shadow moved across the stars. Something vast was watching him. The zone swallowed the captain's ship like a mouth closing around prey. Behind him, the stars had vanished, the safe galaxy erased in an instant. Before him stretched an ocean of shadow, thicker than space, endless and crushing. His ship drifted forward with slow determination, every system fighting to stay alive. Lights dimmed and flickered, controls screamed, but the captain's hands stayed firm. His eyes never left the black ahead. He had expected silence, but instead there was soft whispers rising and fading like a distant tide. The voices grew sharper the deeper he moved. Sometimes they were high, almost like a child crying. Other times, low and rough, like the groan of old stone shifting in the dark. He tried to adjust his comms, but no matter what frequency he turned to, the whispers stayed. They were not signals. They were not echoes. They came from the zone itself. And though he could not understand the words, the tone was clear. The zone was not empty. It was alive. Outside the zone, the alien ships watching from the edge struggled to track him. Their scanners read nothing but static. To them, the human had vanished, yet they stayed, unwilling to leave, caught between fear and curiosity. If the human returned, he would bring the truth of a mystery that had haunted their civilizations for centuries. If he did not, he would be just another ghost swallowed by the dark. But somewhere deep inside, every alien commander felt the same unease. The zone had never allowed anyone in this far before. Something was different this time. Inside, the captain moved deeper still. The darkness shifted, no longer empty, no longer formless. Shapes began to appear in the distance, faint and blurred at first, then sharper as his ship drew closer. Colossal. Structures rose in the black like mountains floating in space. Towers of stone and metal, twisted and ancient, covered in scars older than history. They did not shine, but they glowed faintly, as though light remembered them. The captain's heart beat steady as his eyes studied them. They were not natural. They were built. They were ruins, but no species he knew had ever built in such scale. His scanners tried to measure their size but failed, the numbers bending into impossible values. These were not cities. These were not stations. They were monuments, carved by hands so old that even time had forgotten them. The whispers in his ship grew louder as he neared the ruins. He could almost hear words now, fragments of a language broken and incomplete. His skin prickled with every sound, but he did not turn away. He leaned closer to the glass, his breath slow, his eyes sharp. He had expected death. Instead, the zone was showing him its secrets. The ship trembled, then slowed without his command. The engines still hummed, but something stronger pulled against them. The ruins ahead shifted, opening like a path. The towers leaned back, the shadows bent, and suddenly, A vast space appeared at the center of the structures. It was not empty. It was a gate. The gate floated in the middle of the ruins, larger than mountains, round and perfect. Carved from stone and metal that looked alive, surface was covered in symbols that glowed faintly as his ship approached. His hands tightened. On the controls, ready to pull back, ready to fight, but the gate did not attack. It waited. The whispers fell silent, replaced by one low hum that filled the cabin like a heartbeat. The captain stood, his body rigid, his mind racing. The gate was sealed, yet he felt it watching him, not his ship, not the metal around him. Him, the man. It was as if the zone had been waiting for him to arrive. Far away at the border, alien leaders shouted in fear as their long-range images finally caught sight of the massive gate. Panic spread across their ships. They recognized the symbols carved. On its surface, their oldest records, their most ancient warnings, spoke of that design. It was not a monument. It was a lock, and the human was standing in front of it. The captain stepped closer to the glass, his reflection half broken in the dim light. He could feel the gate calling to him, not in sound, not in thought, but in the weight pressing against his chest. His breath grew shallow, his hands cold, but his eyes never wavered. He had crossed the border, ignored the warnings, survived the silence, and now stood at the heart of the zone. The gate pulsed once, a low flash of light running across its symbols. The hum grew louder. The captain felt it inside his bones. The ship's lights flickered, the controls died, yet he stayed calm. Slowly, he reached out and placed his hand against the cold glass. He did not know why. He did not need to. The gate seemed to respond instantly. Symbols glowed brighter. The hum shifted into a rhythm almost like words, and for the first time, the whispers returned, clear and sharp. They were not screams this time. They were not warnings. They were words, in a language he did not know, yet somehow understood. You may enter. The gate shuddered. The ruins trembled. And before his eyes, the sealed stone split open, revealing a path of pure light inside. The dark. The captain's heart pounded once, hard, but his face stayed calm. He had expected death. Instead, the zone had opened for him. Alone in the silence, he whispered one sentence, his voice low but steady. It was waiting. And then, his ship drifted forward into the light. The gate opened like the slow turning of a world. Massive stone slabs slid apart without sound, releasing a flood of light that cut through the endless black. It was not the bright light of a star or the hard glow of engines. It was softer, alive, almost like it was breathing. The captain's ship drifted closer, drawn forward as though the zone itself had decided his path. For a long moment, he said nothing, only stared into the glowing corridor before him. His face was calm, but inside, his chest, his heart beat heavy. He knew this moment would change everything. The ruins around the gate trembled, their ancient towers vibrating with each pulse of light. Dust and broken stone floated free, yet none of it struck his ship. Instead, the path remained clear, leading him deeper. Behind him, the alien ships at the edge of the zone cried out in fear as their long-range scans captured what was happening. The human had not been destroyed. The gate had opened for him. Panic spread across their fleets. For centuries, the forbidden zone had killed everyone who dared to enter, but now, one man was being allowed through. The captain stepped away from the controls and stood closer to the glass. His reflection seemed smaller against the vast corridor of light stretching before him. He whispered a single word, not to anyone, not even to himself, but to the silence that had followed him this far. Why? The zone did not answer. The gate pulsed again, as if urging him forward. His ship entered the light. Instantly, the darkness fell away. The black walls of the zone dissolved, replaced by endless structures that spread in every direction. The corridor opened into a vast hollow world, larger than any city, larger than planets. Machines the size of mountains floated in silence, their surfaces covered in symbols that glowed faintly as he passed. Rivers of energy pulsed through the air like veins of light, feeding into a central sphere at the heart of the chamber. It was alive, but not in any way he could understand. The captain's breath slowed as he took it all in. He knew then that this was no ruin. This was not the graveyard of a forgotten war. This was a machine. The entire zone was built, crafted, designed. It was not chaos. It was a system. And now it had chosen to reveal itself to him. Whispers rose again, no longer broken, no longer distant. They spoke clearly now, not in his language, but in meaning that slipped directly into his thoughts. He closed his eyes, listening. The voices told him fragments of truth. Long ago, before the rise of any empire still alive, a great war had torn across the stars. A war so vast that galaxies burned. The builders of this place had sealed away their greatest weapon, hidden it behind the forbidden zone, and locked every species out. The gate had been designed to reject all who carried the stain of that war. But humans were new. They had not fought in that war. They were not part of the ancient enemy. To the zone, the captain was not a trespasser. He was the heir. His eyes opened, sharp and unblinking. The whispers did not fade. They grew stronger, pouring images into his mind, fleets of fire, worlds consumed, titans falling into silence. The zone had been created to guard something too dangerous to destroy. And now, it was asking him to choose what came next. Outside the zone, alien leaders argued in panic. Some screamed to attack, to destroy the human before he awakened. What? Slept. Others shouted to retreat, afraid that even watching might draw the zone's anger. But none of them could move. They were trapped by the same thought. If the human succeeded, he would hold power greater than anything the galaxy had ever seen. Inside, the captain's ship drifted toward the central sphere. It hung in the air like a heart of stone and light, pulsing with each beat of the whispers. His steps echoed as he moved through his ship's chamber, closer to the glass, his eyes fixed on the sphere. His hand hovered over the controls that could bring him closer still. He did not tremble. He did not hesitate. Yet his thoughts were heavy. If he touched that core, if he accepted what the zone offered, he would carry the burden of a war older than his species. If he turned away, the truth would vanish with him. Sealed again, until another human dared to come. The lights around him shifted suddenly, glowing brighter, wrapping his ship in lines of fire. Symbols appeared across the glass, words from a language no one living spoke, but he understood them as clearly as his own. They asked one question: "Do you claim this duty?" The captain stood still, breathing slow. He thought of the message that had led him here, the faint cry for help that had haunted him. He thought of the faces of his crew, left behind outside. The zone. He thought of every alien voice that had mocked him, called him reckless, called him doomed. And then he thought of the silence. The endless silence that had swallowed thousands before him. His lips moved, his voice calm and strong. Yes, the core flared with blinding light, and the whispers turned into a single sound applause. Morning. A chorus of both welcome and warning. His ship shook as the energy wrapped around it, pulling him closer to the heart of the zone. Outside, the alien fleet saw only light exploding across their screens. Fear spread through them like fire. The human had answered the zone, and for the first time in thousands of years, the forbidden zone was awake. The captain's ship drifted deeper into the hollow world, wrapped in streams of living light. The core of the zone pulsed brighter with every second, like a heart that had just awakened after endless ages of silence. The voices in his mind no longer whispered. They spoke clearly now, many at once, layered over each other like a chorus. Some sounded human, some alien, and some so strange that no living ear had ever heard them before. Yet he understood, not through words, but through meaning. The zone was telling him its story. Images filled his mind skies torn open by fire. Cities crumbling into dust, fleets of ships stretching across whole star systems. He saw beings larger than mountains, wielding weapons that bent light itself. He saw stars collapse not by age, but by violence. It was the war the galaxy had forgotten, the war the records of every empire only whispered about in half-truths. A war so terrible that its memory had been buried for the survival of all life. The builders of the zone had been victors, or perhaps survivors. He could not tell. They had sealed their greatest weapon here, hiding it behind walls of darkness, surrounding it with fear so no one would ever dare to enter. The zone was both prison and tomb. For ages, no species could pass its gates, none but him. The captain gripped the arm of his chair, his knuckles white. His mind was sharp, but the weight of the visions pressed down on him, heavy as stone. Understood now why so many ships had vanished before. Zone had not destroyed them out of cruelty. It had rejected them, erasing those it judged unworthy. But with him, it had been different. He was new. His species had never stood in that ancient war. Humanity was not bound by the crimes of the past. To the zone, he was the clean slate. The one who could decide what should happen next. The ship slowed as the core loomed ahead. It was vast, larger than mountains, a perfect sphere wrapped in rivers of light. Symbols danced across its surface, shifting faster than his eyes could follow. Yet every mark carried meaning that pressed into his thoughts. Duty, choice, burden. Outside the zone, the alien fleets were in chaos. Some leaders ordered their ships to retreat, fearing what might awaken. Others demanded they advance to prepare for war if the human returned with something beyond their power. Arguments spread like wildfire. But beneath all the noise, one truth weighed on every mind. The human had gone farther than anyone before. If he emerged, he would not return empty-handed. Inside, the captain left his seat and stood near the glass. Closer to the core, his breath fogged faintly on the surface. He stared at the pulsing sphere as if it were enlivened. Perhaps it was. His reflection in the glass looked pale, almost ghostly, but his eyes burned steady. He thought of the message that had led him here, the broken signal calling for help. Was it real? Or had the zone sent it, luring him inside? The thought lingered, sharp as a blade, but he did not step back. He had come too far to retreat. The voices inside him shifted, no longer showing him the past, but speaking of the present. They asked a question, simple but heavy. Would he release the weapon they had sealed? Would he awaken the force that had once broken galaxies? Or would he destroy it, ending their legacy forever? His choice would not be personal. It would shape every world, every life in the galaxy. The captain closed his eyes. He thought of his crew waiting outside, wondering if he would ever return. He thought of the countless species watching from a safe distance, terrified of what he might bring out. He thought of humanity itself, young among the stars, mocked by older empires as reckless, stubborn, too bold for their own safety. Perhaps they were right, but perhaps that was why he was here. Because no other species would have taken the step he had taken. No other would have dared. The zone pulsed harder, shaking his ship. The voices pressed in stronger, urgent, impatient. His mind burned with the weight of their demand. His body trembled, but his voice, when he spoke, was calm. If this power only brings more war, then it should never leave this place. The lights around the core flickered. The voices fell silent, as if holding their breath. For a heartbeat, the whole zone seemed to wait. Then, slowly, the sphere opened. Inside was not fire or weapons, but something stranger. A single structure floated in the hollow center, glowing faintly with its own light. It was not a machine. It was not a weapon. It was a throne, empty and waiting. The captain's breath caught, his eyes narrowing. He understood then. The zone had never been guarding a weapon. It had been guarding a seat of command. Whoever took that place would not carry a tool of destruction. They would carry control of the zone itself, a power to shape or break civilizations. The captain stepped back, his heart pounding. Outside, the aliens watching screamed in terror as their readings spiked beyond measure. Energy levels grew wild, spreading out of the zone like a wave. To them, it was the sign of a weapon awakening. To the captain, it was an invitation. The voices returned, soft and sharp at once. The choice is yours. The captain stood silent, staring at the throne of light, his reflection trembling in the glass. He did not move yet. He did not answer yet. But in his silence, the galaxy held its breath. The throne of light floated at the heart of the core, glowing with a calm that felt older than time itself. It was not made of stone or metal, but of pure energy shaped into form, waiting, patient, eternal. The captain's eyes locked on it, his breath steady though, his heart thundered like a drum inside his chest. He knew now that the Forbidden Zone had not been created to guard a weapon. It had been created to guard power. The one who sat there would not command soldiers or ships. They would command the zone itself, with all its endless machines, its walls of silence, its rivers of light that reached across the galaxy. It was not just a throne, it was control. The voices in his mind grew louder, pressing against him from every side. They whispered of what he could do. He could rebuild empires, could erase entire fleets in an instant. He could create order in a galaxy that had never known peace, could rule, not as a man, not as a soldier, but as the voice of something far greater. The temptation was sharp, cutting through even his iron resolve. But beneath the promises there was something else, a warning, a question. Would he use this power for the galaxy, or would the galaxy drown beneath it again? The captain's hands curled into fists. His reflection stared back from the glass, pale and tired, but his eyes burned steady. He thought of the war. The zone had shown him the endless destruction, the burning stars. He thought of the weight of history pressing down on every decision. He thought of his people, young and reckless among the stars, mocked by the older races for their boldness. Was this why the zone had chosen him? Because only a human would be foolish enough or brave enough to walk in alone? Fleets held their breath. Scanners burned with readings they could not believe. The human was standing at the heart of the zone. The energy levels rising inside could shatter entire star systems. If he chose to claim it, the balance of the galaxy would be broken forever. Some whispered in fear that humanity would rise as masters. Others whispered that the human might destroy them all. None could act. None dared cross the border. They could only wait. Inside, the captain took a slow step closer to the throne. The light pulsed, as if it felt him, as if it recognized him. His shadow stretched across the floor of his ship, long and sharp, trembling with each heartbeat of the core. He stopped just short of the glass, staring silent. He could end it here. He could step back, let the zone seal itself again, let the silence return. He could vanish into the darkness, leaving the mystery untouched for another 1,000 years. Or he could claim the throne, and nothing would ever be the same. The voices pressed harder, wrapping around him like a storm. Some pleaded, some demanded, some warned. He closed his eyes, letting the noise fade until only his own thought remained. It was not power that had brought him here. It was not glory. It was a voice, faint and broken, calling for help, he remembered. It now, clearer than ever. Whether it was real or the zone's lure, it did not matter. Someone had called. And he had answered. He opened his eyes. His face was calm, his voice low but steady. If I take this power, I take it for all. If I leave it for none. But it cannot remain sleeping, not anymore. The zone shuddered, as if it understood. The throne blazed with light brighter than any star, filling his ship burning. Through every shadow, the captain did not step back. Slowly he reached out his hand, and the light wrapped around him like a second skin. The energy surged, flooding into his body, his mind, his very breath. For a moment, he was no longer a man. It was the zone. Outside, the alien fleet saw the darkness explode into light. The Forbidden Zone, silent for ages, now pulsed with energy. That spilled into space, touching every ship, every world within reach. Fear swept through the empires. Some cried that the human had awakened a weapon. Others whispered that a new age had begun. Inside the core, the captain stood at the throne, wrapped in endless fire. Ow. His voice echoed across the chamber, not shouted, not thunderous, but calm, carried by the zone itself. This place belongs to none, but I will guard it, alone. The throne flared one final time, and the light consumed him. His ship vanished, his figure dissolved, and then silence returned. The core dimmed, the corridors of light faded, and the ruins settled back into shadow. The gate closed behind him, sealing the zone once more. To the aliens waiting, the human was gone, as though erased like all the others before. But deep inside, the forbidden zone was no longer empty. A presence now lived at its heart, human presence, watching, waiting, guarding. For the first time in ages, the forbidden zone was not silent. It had a voice, and that voice was human. This ending leaves your audience with a twist, plus closure. The human captain doesn't become a conqueror, doesn't simply vanish. He becomes the new guardian of the zone, fulfilling the title's promise and leaving space for mystery if you want sequels.